going to do a quick audio check in the chat. If you can hear me, just give me a thumbs up and let me know that you heard me okay. Great, Caitlin, thanks so much. Great, awesome. So sorry about that. I did not have my screen shared earlier, and I was sharing a couple questions in the chat just to get people that were already on the call something to do. And so just apologize for those thought that maybe the meeting had started. So this is Capturing Volunteer Impact, the Louisiana 4-H Volunteer Development Lunch and Learn summer series. So on this call today, I do have a co-presenter. So Lynette Abear, you want to say hello?
Hello.
Great. So when I first started with Louisiana 4-H, Lynette did an excellent job just showing me some of the dynamics reporting features, and she's got some, as many of our regional coordinators do, has some excellent reports. And so I thought that she'd be a great presenter today to just talk about the topic of capturing volunteer impact and showing some of the volunteer impact reports that she's able to capture. And just a quick overview, we've been using Microsoft Teams, and I know we're very comfortable with using it now, but at any point in time, there is conversation going on in the chat. And if you don't want to unmute your mic and ask a question, feel free to ask a question in the chat at any point in time. So a little bit overview about the Volunteer Development Lunch and Learn. So this is a summer series from May through September. If you've missed any of the sessions, we did do a session on engaging volunteers remotely. In May and June, we talked about volunteer recruitment with Pam Pierce, and today we're talking about capturing volunteer impact. August is on volunteer utilization. We have recorded all of these sessions, and previous materials is available. There was a link in my newsletter and also on your screen. And then if you don't have that link, I would be more than happy to share it with you. So if you have an idea of topic for September, just let me know. I do look at your reflections and I do come up with the topics as needed. So feel free to share with relevant topics for that September session. So a little bit overview of the agenda for today is talking more about what we mean by capturing volunteer impact. And then Lynette's going to go deeper into capturing impact to learn, grow, support our programs. She's going to share with you a Parish volunteer profile. So we'll kind of look at that, what that can tell us, and then providing you with some survey and impact report examples as well. And then I'm going to go into the volunteer impact log and the benefits of using that to the volunteer as well as the program, and then how to use it. And then we'll often have some time for discussion and some questions. And then just a quick note, we do have an icebreaker in the chat, so I'll ask just a question. And as you all know, I am a coffee drinker quite heavily, and so I always have my coffee with me. I'm interested, so are you a coffee drinker? Are you a tea drinker? And it looks like we have some folks that are both. That's great, but the majority of you are coffee drinkers. I always find it interesting when people don't drink coffee, and I wonder about them. Just kidding. And then I asked you about the topic of capturing volunteer impact and how comfortable you are with it. And looks like we've got some that are comfortable and somewhat comfortable, and then not very comfortable at all. And that is absolutely okay. And hopefully we learn some more on this call, and then learn more from others. If you're interested in using this Poly, I have created a very quick screen share that I can share with others if they are interested in using it further. It's just one of the apps that is available through Microsoft Teams. And just a quick shout out to my coworkers, Christina and Crystal, who are presenting on some of the technology tools for LAE 4HA. That's August 12th, 10 o'clock. And so if you have not if you've not looked at that session and you've not thought about attending, I just encourage you to attend. I think that'll be a great session where they can introduce a lot of the technology tools that we've been using. So just a reminder that we use the ISOTER method for effective volunteer management in Louisiana 4-H. So that's your identification. Have you assessed the program needs, identified potential volunteer roles, and then within your selection, so are you effectively matching those volunteers with the roles that you need? And then how are you orienting, so allowing volunteers to learn more about your program, providing them those training opportunities where they can gain more knowledge and develop their skills, also providing them some professional development opportunities. And then within your utilization, are you removing the barriers to allow them to lead and do their roles effectively? What support and resources are you providing them? Then within recognition that we did touch on also when we were talking about recruitment last week, but are you often showing your volunteers that they're appreciated? How are you recognizing them continuously for their efforts? And then within evaluation, not just evaluating your volunteers, but sharing the vision and success of your program with your volunteers, and then allowing them to have an active voice in your programs and making them better. And so not just evaluating volunteers, but allowing your volunteers to evaluate our programs as well. So today, when we talk about capturing volunteer impact, it's important to note that most organizations, or many of the organizations that manage volunteers, don't actually do a very good job measuring the impact or capturing volunteer reports. In fact, there was a study done of a number of nonprofits and organizations that take on volunteers throughout the United States, and found that only about 30% of those organizations did a great job of measuring the impact of their volunteers, which I think is somewhat, it is unfortunate, because if we're not effectively, we don't have systems in place to track volunteer impact, and also, what we're providing our volunteers beyond just the numbers and the hours, we're not getting that data that we would need to invest in those programs, also invest in our volunteer talent. And as Lynette will touch on, and we'll touch on further today, there's a whole lot of information that our volunteers can provide to help us improve our programs, for grant reporting purposes, for marketing purposes, and then just to get overall, make our programs better. And so we need to find ways to improve our systems, to put systems in place where we're capturing the impact of our volunteers, and then also what we're contributing to our volunteers. And so we're going to talk more about that today. Does somebody have a question? So just a quick reminder that if you're on the call, if you have a question, you can unmute your mic, and then if you do not, just check on your mic to make sure that your mic is muted so it doesn't interfere with the call. Now, I introduced the community engagement spectrum, the partnership spectrum, in a previous Lunch and Learn. And so if you're looking at moving your volunteer partnerships from information, which is like a low-level one-way relationship, into active participation, if you think about capturing the impact of our volunteers and how that can move us further along the spectrum. So if you're in information stage, that's that one-way relationship where you're delivering your information to volunteers. If you're moving into consultation, that's where your volunteers are providing that feedback. So, after a program, you allowing your volunteers to track their impact, and then also allowing them to reflect on the program and how it's contributing to community, ways that program could improve. And then moving into active participation, where you're taking that data and you're allowing your volunteers are contributing to actively shape and develop your programs, and then allowing where your volunteer voice is actually heard in that. So if you think about capturing impact, and we're capturing hours, we're capturing the number of volunteers, we're capturing orientations, training, but we're also getting information back from them that allows us to reflect on our programs and improve them and make them better. And so giving them that voice in the process. Now, Lynette's going to take over from here. And before we move on, just a quick discussion question. So what are some of the challenges that you face with capturing volunteer impact? So if somebody wants to comment in the chat or unmute their mic. So what are some of the challenges? Okay, so Victoria said, we don't always know what our volunteers are helping with, especially at the club level. Adriana said, not doing it at the right time. Absolutely. So timely, having that in continuous system in place for tracking impact, I think is important there. So great idea. And Victoria, when you say I don't always know what your volunteers are helping with, and so that's kind of the information we're also trying to capture. And I hope that I have some ideas for how to do that a little bit later on this call. And Lynette said volunteers don't want recognition, and she's absolutely right. Some of them just don't say don't care, but almost feel, if I send them something, hey, I want to do a feature on you, if they're almost a little feel that that's a little bit of an exhausting process. So I absolutely agree. And Rochelle said they don't want to take the time to fill out impact reports. To them, they do not get anything out of reporting. And that's true. And there's a way that we can allow them to see that their reporting is actually beneficial to the program. And I do think we've got a potential process or solution that might allow some of our volunteers to change the way they feel about reporting and maybe potentially have them start reporting in the future. So Lynette, are you seeing some of these?
I am. You ready for me to take over? Any
more? I think they're very good, and I do think that some of them will be answered with some of the materials that we're presenting today.
So I just want to thank Megan for including me in the presentation. I've really enjoyed working for her and the enthusiasm she's bringing to our volunteer development program. And I know capturing volunteer impacts can be a chore for us, but we need to recognize how it could really help us learn, grow, and support as individual professionals, as well as helping our program and the volunteers. So for my brief part of the presentation, I'm hoping that I could kind of give you a little insight into these things. So, oops, went too fast. So let's talk about what we can learn from volunteer impacts. We can just learn, what does our volunteer program look like? Are there areas that need our attention? Are there areas of our volunteer management plan that we need to adjust? What's working? What do we need to improve? Are there certain volunteer trends that we need to be aware of? Looking at volunteer impacts, how did it help us to grow? Are there areas of our management plan that we need to adjust? What's working? What needs improvement? What are those trends? Some of those same questions. Do we have some untapped potential in volunteers? Are some of our volunteers ready for a role change? Those are all things that will help us to learn about our program and help us to grow.
And I think that's a really good point, Lynette. So if you're, if you're regularly capturing information from your volunteers and we're looking for hard data and, doing some surveying and evaluation tools, but just allowing volunteers will allow capturing information from them. So if we're not effective in our training, or potentially if a volunteer maybe, like you said, is out going to roll, or maybe has a skill or talent that we were unaware of before, that might be able to, come up in some of our volunteer impacts, if we're doing a good job of regularly capturing information from them.
So, and I think in some of the discussion and the question that Megan asked is the challenges, and these are some of the key messages that we could share with the volunteers, why it's important that we get their feedback and capture their impact. It helps the 4-H program. You have to think about why they're volunteering, because they care about youth and they care about the program. So it's a way that we sell it to them. It could help our program secure funding and grants. It helps us to market our program. It helps us to support the volunteers and recognize them. And then it also helps you in your accountability. So let's look at a few ways that we could assess volunteer impact and some tools that you have available to you. One of my favorite tools, I use it through advisory process or just looking at program reviews, is a simple SWAT survey. In this process, you look at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. You could do this as a professional when you stop and think about your 4-H program and the volunteer component. You can do a reflection. You could do this with your advisory committee. You can do this by surveying or asking a volunteer committee or your volunteers these questions. I think this is a really easy assessment to look at your volunteer program. So I want to ask you, what do you think you can learn from doing this survey? And this is a sample one that I have up there. So when you're studying this SWAT survey, what can we learn from it? Anyone have any thoughts?
So Adriana said where we need volunteers.
Very good. Where are the opportunities for volunteers? Okay. So you learn that. So how do we, knowing that knowledge, how do we help grow our volunteer program? And then ultimately, we'll talk about this a little later, is how do you use this to support the program and support your work? So when you have to do your portfolio or an impact report, you could use this as part of your situational analysis. This is something that you did to learn the needs. And this is how you identified a situation that you needed to work on. So SWAT is definitely one of the tools that you could use to learn about your program, to help grow your program, and then support you and your work and the program. Any general questions about a SWOT analysis?
Lynette, I have a question. How often do you do a SWOT? I guess how often would you recommend?
I think that you probably need to gauge that based on participation in the SWOT and also the stage of your program.
Okay.
I know advisory systems in general, we recommend at least 2 a year to help you do the needs assessment and then the action plan, and then also to evaluate the action plan. So you could do the SWOT for the needs identification, and then you could also do it after you have implemented your action plan to see how the action plan's gone. What are the strengths of the action plans? What are the weaknesses? So I think it's a tool that you can continue to use.
Okay. 8.
Okay, I think another valuable tool that we have afforded to us is the Parish Volunteer Profile. And this is very dependent on you as the agent, how you manage your program and how you input this information into Dynamics. So this is a report. It's a 3-year trend that shows your volunteer force in your parish. This is something as a regional coordinator that I pull annually to help agents to look at their volunteer program. It's a talking point that we have when we do our performance appraisals. It's also something I recommend to agents to use when they're submitting their portfolios, as well as their impact reports and their promotion and tenure. So if you look at this, I think there's some key things that you can pick up from it. You see I circled something that I think would be a question for me as an agent as well as a regional coordinator is, if your parish program has 800 youth and you offer several contests to help youth show mastery and you only are reporting that you are using 10 volunteers as judges. So my question would be, is that accurate? Is that a reporting error? Or is that an opportunity for you to engage more volunteers in your program? The overnight chaperone, I highlighted that as a regional coordinator. And as an agent, you know that we have an increased expectation that we want to secure more volunteers in overnight settings so that we have a safer environment and a more caring environment for those young people. So I think that's a very strong trend in a parish that's showing a significant increase in overnight chaperone volunteers. The same is true for school enrichment volunteers. A talking point for me would be, I see that you're making an increased effort in school enrichment and you're tapping volunteers to help with that. And then once again, I think that's a trend that you would note in your promotion and tenure as well as in your portfolio. So that would help to support you. Now, another area that would help you to learn and grow about your program is when you divide up the different project areas and the volunteers that you have supporting those projects. I think a key thing that you could do, you could also pull a project summary report from Dynamics, and it would help you to look at the interest of your members and if there's opportunities to try to recruit volunteers if you have some other project areas that are of interest to a large population. Any questions about the parish volunteer profile and other ways that you think you could learn more about your program by using it, how to help grow your program, and then also how it can support your program and your work?
I don't see anything coming up in the chat yet, but I guess we'll give some folks a minute. But I just thought it was interesting too on this profile how the enrollments have grown considerably. So I thought that, you know, is what is a good talking point, as well as looks like re-enrollments have grown also, which is very interesting. And so I guess the question is everybody know how to pull these reports? And if not, in the newsletter there is a link that kind of talks more about the Dynamics reports and how to access them. And so if you're not familiar with this report and how to pull it, you know, look through that information in the newsletter. But it doesn't look like there's any questions from anybody. Any comments? Allison said, I think that accurately entering the volunteers and Dynamics is important. And do you want to comment on that, Lynette, or do you want?
I think we could tag team that. It is important. And Megan, I guess if you want to cover the volunteer policy for liability issues, that is very key.
Yeah.
But beyond that, just having this information to help you manage your program, you know, I think that's one of the key roles we have as a 4-H agent is a volunteer manager. So this information to me is very valuable to help us look at our program and manage it.
Yeah, it's a it's a requirement, it's a liability issue if we're not, accurately reporting our volunteer numbers and dynamics as well. But yes, very, very important thing to do.
So, and Allison, just to respond to your chat, there is a volunteer enrollment card. Megan, if you want to speak about that and how that helps us to capture this enrollment.
Charles is asking me, so are you talking about the volunteer enrollment form?
Yes.
Yes. So we do have we have a volunteer enrollment form, and now we have actually an online volunteer enrollment form as well, which I think is going to be pretty important going into this fall. But it has like information that you can capture on where to, skills for your volunteers, placements of volunteers, and then really important data. One thing that Charles and I worked on is just taking that volunteer enrollment card and making it an online electronic form. I know I've mentioned this before, but one time I was at his parish and watched him hand out 40 different paper forms. And so I thought, well, we could definitely improve on this process. And so instead of just having a paper form for all of your volunteers that you have to go in and actually manually input this information from a paper form, now at least you have an electronic version that's accessible and that could spit out a Excel version of that information that you need from the enrollment card. So, so thank you, Charles, for mentioning that. And I think going into this fall, that's going to be a very important tool to use. And so will definitely be accessible, and I can send that out to everybody. So thanks for mentioning that.
Well, I think using these systems to help us manage our program, just being able to pull up a list of who is overnight chaperone trained, who's defensive driving trained. So especially if you're new to a parish, having that resource as you get to know the parish and the volunteers, just knowing who serves in what roles is something that can be helpful to you to learn your program. Just creating an email listserv for volunteers that are interested in a certain project area is something that can be done as well. So a lot of tools in Dynamics that you could pull in addition to the parish volunteer profile.
And what Lynette said about that mailing list, like how handy it is to have. And so mailing list is something that I've been working on, and I've been able to track at least some of the numbers of the opens of that volunteer newsletter. And so I'm really looking for agents to go into Dynamics and make sure that their email information of their volunteers is accurate, so that I'm able to send them out, state level trainings when those opportunities are available. And right now I'm still in the process of trying to clean up that mailing list, because many of the emails are not active and not working. And then at the parish level, just making sure that you have accurate contact information for your volunteers is extremely important. I did hear that of one of our specialists that has a mailing list of over 2,000 volunteers, and I thought, wow, that would be great. But if you want to get information out, and if you want to get information from your volunteers, having that, very active mailing list is something that I'd encourage you to start doing if you haven't done it yet. So just a quick comment on that.
That's probably another area that we could do a complete training on, is how to best tap the resources that Dynamics can provide to you.
Absolutely.
Any questions about the parish volunteer profile? Okay, I just wanted to review a few possible surveys that we have used in the Southwest region that helped us capture some volunteer information. Just keep in mind that we do have available to us the Qualtric system. It's a free system through our PAWS account that allows you to do some electronic surveys. You could generate QR codes, and it's really easy to pull reports from that. And of course, you could always do pen and paper surveys if that meets your audience better. This is a survey that Hannah Duvall created when we did our regional livestock training. And it was just a knowledge gain survey and how would they use it. And this was done for both youth and adult volunteers that attended. This is one survey that we use for our regional leader training, and it's also available to parishes to modify for their parish leader training. And I just wanted to go through the different parts and the information that we're capturing that helps us to learn, grow, and support our program. The very first section is a knowledge gain or motivation. So what did they learn, or how were they motivated by participating in our regional training? The next section, we wanted to know, how will you utilize this information? What will their reach be? So that gives us some, especially in our region, we try to do train the trainer, where they will go back and use the information to train others. So we really wanted to know their outreach efforts. Then as part of the training, we wanted to know what information they needed besides what was provided to them today to help us to plan future trainings. Then of course we wanted to know just some basic demographics on them, and then just some general feedback, giving them the open-ended questions so they could provide us some feedbacks that they have. So I think these are all key components that help us to continue to support our program, but also learn and develop new programming based on the needs identified and the feedback given. Then I wanted to show you how we flip this into an impact report. So if you impact reporting, you have your 3 R's. What is the relevance? Why was the program planned and implemented? So that's when we present the situation. So based on the tools I showed today, what information could you use from the SWOT analysis in relevance? Anybody want to take a stab at a guess? What from a SWOT analysis could you use to include in a situational or relevant statement for an impact report? The state. What opportunities in an area has developed. So it could be that in fall of 2019, a SWOT analysis was conducted with the volunteers in a certain parish. Based on the results from the SWOT analysis, the strengths of the program were identified, opportunities identified were, and then you give the highlights of the SWAT survey. And then you have a situation of which you based your response on, your action plan. So it supports why you developed the plan that you developed. So what about if you're thinking about your parish profile? How can you develop a situation or relevance based on the information from your parish profile? Could you possibly look at if there was an increased need for a certain project area to have a volunteer workforce, and that's why you planned a training in a certain project area for volunteers? If there was especially when you think about shooting sports and how that continues to grow, that would be a reason maybe why you targeted that project development for your volunteers. So those are some key things that you could use to help build your situational or relevance for your impact reporting. Your response is, what did you plan to do? And what goals and objectives you hope to achieve. And then the results are the output and the outcome that was achieved through your plans. And this is just another sample of one that we did for our regional leader training. Any questions? Anything I can clarify before I turn it back over to Megan?
Well, I guess I'd give everybody just a minute to see what questions they have. But
Sure.
these reports that you have, I mean, they're very well done. And I guess moving into the fall, a lot of these questions can be reproduced in like a Qualtric survey, I guess. And so you normally, do y'all use paper or do you use Qualtrics or both, I guess?
We've done so, like for the livestock training, we had the QR codes throughout the room for those that wanted to do it electronically, but we also offered the paper option.
Okay.
That's kind of been the trend we've done.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the Qualtric surveys. They're, you know, once you get in there, they're relatively easy to use. And I do think that LSU offers on their opportunities for professional development. They do have some online trainings for Qualtrics for individuals that don't feel comfortable with using it. Have you ever used Google Forms or Lynette? Or okay.
I have not used Google Forms. I have to tell you, I was a big fan of SurveyMonkey's Zoomerang.
Yeah.
So I had to convert to Qualtrics. Cassie and Victoria gave our region a little professional development insight into that about a year ago. So I've stepped up my learning curve with Qualtrics. I'm learning it, and it does have a lot of tools. I like the way it can generate reports for us. But it is a good tool, and it's so convenient to have it done electronically for it to report the results to you. So what we've done is when we've done a combination of electronic and paper, we go back in and we enter the paper results into the Qualtrics so that we can combine it all into one.
It's very handy. Yeah. So, and I guess so Victoria and Cassie, you need help with Qualtrics. I guess they're your experts, right?
they were our introduction to Qualtrics in the region.
Great.
I see Jennifer put she loves Google Forms. She thinks it's easier than Qualtrics. I
use Google Forms for really quick, and I know y'all know this, for those really quick evaluation tools. Yeah, I like the snapshot reports. They're really fairly simple to use. I do like Qualtrics just if I'm going to go more in depth, and something like what you were showing us, Lynette, I would definitely use Qualtrics for that. But yes, I use Google Forms heavily also. I do find Google Forms are a little easier to share too, and pull reports from. And Victoria said both are fabulous depending on what you're trying to do. Yeah, I absolutely agree. Good deal.
Well, thanks again, Megan, for letting me share.
No problem. Thank you so much for your help. All right, so before we move on, does anybody have any questions they want to ask in the chat? Anything that they need to be, any clarification? Just giving you another chance to do that. And at any point in time, if you do have a question or a comment, you can just feel free to share in the chat. And so I'm going to move on. I'm going to talk a little bit about some initiatives that I'm trying to develop and some that are kind of evolving right now. And so recently, I wrote a piece on how organizations, how they've become, even though we've become more reliant on volunteers to meet our mission, just in a situation where a lot of, I say, nonprofits are getting, budget cuts, and you have a lot of competition, for meeting the same type of program goals, but we still kind of fail to understand how the value and the impact of our volunteers. And so something that I've seen be very effective is just continuously allowing your volunteers to log as part of their service. So like it becomes an essential responsibility for your volunteers. It becomes a part of their role as a volunteer. It allows you to capture information, and it also allows them to start logging their impact and seeing the impact that their role as a volunteer is making. And so I've seen this very effective in some of the national programs that have been involved in. And so previous role, I ran an AmeriCorps program, and I had two of them actually. One of them I had about 20 to 30 individuals that were serving at the lowest level, which is like 10 hours a week. And so they had an impact report that was a requirement of their volunteer role. And so they did that log continuously as they served. So it was like a weekly thing. They'd go in, they'd log their hours, they'd log their service, essential activities, and then do a quick reflection. And then with AmeriCorps Avista, it was a monthly report that allowed them, the volunteers, they logged their hours, they logged the number of, they logged resource generation, they also logged partnership, any new essential partnerships that they've been able to create. And then they logged challenges and learning and additional information that allowed us to see just the impact of that volunteer and that role that they were serving with that organization. And so it was really effective for me when I had to do those annual, well, I say every 6 months. I had a huge grant report that was like 60 pages. And so I needed that information to generate that report. And so just having that kind of continuous process of logging information and then requesting it from them. And so it was a system that was ongoing, and I didn't have to constantly remind, but because it became that essential responsibility. And I allowed those volunteers to do that, while they were serving, generating and logging their impact. So there was, I think, 3 systems that I had in place for tracking impact. And so with the agency level, so we had about 45 different nonprofits. They had a volunteer reporting log, and it was a Google form. It's very simple. Set it up to go out every month just as a reminder. And it was really more of logging the number of volunteers and then logging the number of hours. And then if it was an adult volunteer or a youth volunteer. And that was very simple, and it only took a couple of minutes for them to log, every month. We also had the AmeriCorps the monthly report. And so think of these as more of a involved, it took them I would say a good, 30 minutes to an hour to generate that report, because it had a reflective component to it, not just, it moved beyond just hours, and allowed us to see kind of the impact that those volunteers were making on those community agencies. And then we had a volunteer impact log, which was more for each volunteer to track their hours, activities, learning, professional development. And we had about 6,500 volunteers. And so I'll say it took some time for that impact log to take off, obviously, and we did incentivize that process for our volunteers. But over time, they got very comfortable doing it. And I saw that they often logged their hours, regularly as they served, or sometimes weekly, or even monthly. We did allow them to kind of backlog as long as they had somebody that could be a reference for their service. So one thing that I've been working on, hold on one second, is this volunteer impact log with the VLA and Volunteer Louisiana. So allowing volunteers to log hours to receive recognition, certificate, and a lapel pin. And we've been using this. We've actually have some volunteers that are now using it. And I did talk about it a little bit in the newsletter. The system's called Give Pulse, and it's probably, I would say, the #1 system right now for logging community engagement, civic engagement, volunteers hours. And it's relatively simple to use, and it allows the volunteers to create an impact log, or to try to generate a volunteer record, and allows them to, if they need to, print a certificate or a report of their service as well. And so I'm going to quickly kind of show you how that works and what some of the volunteers have done. Just give me a moment. And if it looks familiar at all, it's because we started using it for Egg Magic, and then Egg Magic was canceled. All right, and now I'm going to share my other screen. Just a moment. So here's the volunteer Louisiana, or the Louisiana 4-H Give Pulse page, and you'll see that we've got some volunteers that are already logging. There's impacts, hours, does capture a dollar value generated or shared publicly, and then total economic impact. And you'll see some of our volunteers that have started logging impacts. So if I click on impacts, right, you see that Penny logged some service. Sarah is logging some of her hours as well. Miss Ruby's logging some hours. So, and you'll see activity. If I click on Sarah's profile, right, so she started kind of generating a volunteer record. You'll see she's got 25 impact logs. She's already almost at her 150 hours. She's got a little bit about boards that she's a part of, her interests, causes, skills, and then some of the impacts that she's been able to log. I can see how engaged she is as a volunteer, number of hours. And I can also see, you know, she started using it in January, and you know, over time I could start to see a trend if she started volunteering more or volunteering less. Some additional tools that she has. So if I go to my activity, I'm going to go to my impacts and show you. So here's kind of some of the stuff that I've logged on here. I've got, you know, these have been verified. I have an option to print a summary report if I want to. So if I click on that, what it does is it generates a PDF document that I'll show you in just a moment. And then I also have this export function that you can click export, and it exports as an Excel document as well if you need that. Another tool that I really like about it, if you click this arrow, you have an option to download a certificate. So for volunteers that are working towards their portfolio or master volunteer portfolio, they could click download or certificate, and it actually gives them a certificate of their service. So quickly show you that. So here's one of the certificates that it was able to generate for me. And then here is kind of a record of some of the service that I've performed. So you do have a lot of different download options as well. Go back. And then on the, so on my side, and I guess for anybody that's, you know, starting maybe potentially heavily using it, it does allow, you know, to capture hours, dollar value, economic impact, but it also allows you to capture reflections. And so I've, for example, in this particular report, you know, you have a verification. So you have, if there's a you know, parish agent that serves to verify the date of service, the type of impact, so time, money, goods, training, and other. So it also, I've input some of the 21st century skills, or like essential leadership development. So critical thinking, communication, teamwork, digital technology. So some of the skills that may have been further developed as part of their volunteer experience, something I'm very interested in tracking. They have an opportunity to write a reflection about their experience. They can also attach important files as well. And then they can just click add impact. And then I would get an email, or their reviewer would get an email to verify their service. So it's relatively simple system to use. And right now we do have the Volunteer Louisiana is able to offer, through that partnership, for our volunteers that log at least 150 hours in that 12-month period, they do get recognized virtually, and they receive a certificate and a pin as well. There's also some additional ways that we're looking to recognize volunteers that are logging their service. And so there is the President's Volunteer Service Award that we're working on as well with the VLA. So a number of ways, but just having an opportunity for them to capture their service that they've done, generate that volunteer record and have that volunteer, even just this page is so important to have for some of the awards that we try to recognize them for. We often, are going through trying to find information on, what specifically a volunteer has been involved in. And so just having that ongoing active report, this public page that it's able to generate for them is very, very helpful. And then there is some additional information and instructions in that volunteer newsletter of how to log hours. So if you want to go on there, play around with it, log something yourself and see how easy it is to use, or you want to share that with your volunteers, I do have that link on the screen for you as well. Any questions about this before we move on? So one thing just quickly I want to cover is why are we logging impact? Obviously, there's a benefit to our program. Finding areas of need and improvement, documenting that impact. For me, I like the numbers and I like the information because it provides an opportunity to improve grant reports. And then potentially if you have a grant that you want to write, you have access to that information a lot more quickly. And then, capturing information for marketing purposes and accountability for yourself as well, which was also covered by Lynette earlier. And then for the volunteer, allowing them to earn awards, be recognized, capture learning and professional development. And then for them to see how their efforts are contributing to the program and the community, and find areas of need and improvement as well. So there's a lot of benefits or why we're logging. We want to move into logging volunteer impact, allowing our volunteers to log impact. Okay. So idea sharing, does anybody want to share what has worked for them in the past, potential improvements that they're hoping to make in their program and logging, specifically in logging, capturing volunteer impact? Or anything interesting that you may have learned today?
Megan, this is Adriana. I learned today that there's a lot that we need to learn. There are lots of things that you talk about that I'm not so sure I am at least very comfortable with. Lots of new ways of doing things. So your presentation was great in trying to provide new ways of doing things to us. But there's a lot of new things out there.
And that's good. And so I think probably a lot of people might be thinking that same thing. And so if we need to, have like a part 2, or to kind of have more of a hands-on, step-by-step session, on capturing volunteer impact in the future, absolutely let me know in the reflection when I send it out, because if it's beyond where you are right now, some of you, then we can go further. We can take a step back also. So thank you very much, Adriana, for your comments.
No, and you know what? I think that we get sometimes we're so overwhelmed at the parish level, and that, I mean, the volunteers are really important, but everything else that we're doing is important. So it's hard to prioritize these things sometimes. That's how I see it. That's why when I'm listening to you, my head is going all over trying to figure out what is it that we're not doing. And if it's easy, why is it that I'm not doing it? It's because sometimes we don't know how, to do everything at the same time. So yes, I think we need a second session on these things, because you touch lots of different aspects that are really important to us.
Yeah, definitely. So when I do share that reflection, Adriana, I do put some comments in there, and everybody on the call, just, if we introduce something and it was just too, beyond where you are right now, if you need us to dive deeper into any topic, just make those comments. We'll absolutely be able to do that. Where we, maybe we had more than an hour and it was just a little bit slower, or we could, have potentially some office hours where, and I'm not going to speak for Lynette, but maybe Lynette and I work together to kind of show you some slower, how to access some of these reports and dynamics, or how to, log impact. I think that's something we may be able to explore in the future. So thanks so much for your comment there.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
And also more comments in the chat. And Lynette said she'd be happy to partner. All right, Lynette, I'll reach out. Thanks so much. And then also in the chat, yes, hands-on training, more step-by-step would be great. So yeah, let's work on, creating these systems is a process. It's not going to happen overnight. It took me years to get it figured out in my previous role, and it's going to take me a while in this new role. And so, we can work on this together. So thanks so much for your comments. And Alexis said also step-by-step, more specific, volunteer, how to access those reports. So, and this is what these lunch and learns are for. It's to find out, we introduce a topic, and then we need to, what do we need to do further to make sure that we understand. So thank you all for your comments. And it helps me tremendously when you tell me what it is you need from me. Cheat sheet, step by step. Very good. Thank you, Teresa. I appreciate that. And then Ashley said, especially if I can recruit the local community college, I would love to offer better hour reporting to them. And so, and I think if I'm not mistaken, Ashley, it was something that you were actually on board to do right before the COVID kind of shut down. I think it might have been you, but when I say that, they're logging service and logging hours is part of like a organization, as part of a student organization. That's a lot of times a requirement. Yeah, it was definitely Ashley. Thanks for letting me know. So if you're offering this opportunity if you're specifically recruiting like college age volunteers, allowing them that option to capture and report on their service, because they may need those reports for their organizations that they're a part of at their college or their university. So thanks so much for that. I appreciate y'all sharing today. And just a quick, we're kind of running short of time, and I know y'all time is very valuable. So just a couple quick highlighting some opportunities for your volunteers. So the Louisiana 4-H Volunteer Conference is going to go virtual for 2020. Registration is open. Right now we have 3 different states already represented. They have about 50 people registered. And so I'd love to have agents just have an opportunity to submit a proposal to present. So if you have a topic that you want to present on, or just something, we really encourage you to do that. That presentation proposal application is open, and that's going to be open until August 3rd. So please take the time to look at that and draft something that we'd be able to present to our volunteers. And register yourself. The registration is free. There is an opportunity to donate if you wish, but it's not a requirement. So do register. I'm sure there'll be quite a bit to be learned from that. Also to reward your volunteers for their efforts, the VLA Volunteer Awards application has been extended to August 3rd. So a number of ways that your volunteers can be rewarded for their efforts. And so that's also in the newsletter, and I can put that link out if you need it again. But do, take some time to recognize your volunteers and submit an application for them for an award for them. And then the grant application, so that is open, the VLA grant application for your volunteers as well. So do share that with them. That's also due August 3rd. Trying to make a very consistent deadline with all of the opportunities that the VLA is presenting. So that is available. There's 2 grants at $250 each will be awarded, and that link is also in the newsletter. So do look for that. And so we have a regional volunteer call again. I put this in the newsletter, and some of you have seen it on social media. So the volunteer specialists of the Southern region have gone together, and this will be our second volunteer conversation. So it allows our volunteers to kind of get connected and explore ideas. We're talking more about virtual meetings and tools for engaging youth virtually. It's also might be, if you want to just join in and listen, opportunity for you to potentially learn. So the join link is also in the newsletter. And so do share that with your volunteers if you haven't done that already, if you feel like they'd be interested, and that is tonight starting at 6 o'clock. And the newsletter, as you've seen, I've kind of upgraded that. So it's not just an agent newsletter, but there's also the volunteer newsletter. So at the top of your newsletter, there's an option to select the agent view or the volunteer view. So look for that. Please share it with your volunteers. It's a way for them to feel more connected to 4-H, and an opportunity for them to, develop some new skills. So a number of the webinars and opportunities that are presented there. And also we do have a webinar that Ruby Miller is leading on July 23rd that teaches them, and it's more slowly, but how to deliver a virtual presentation using Microsoft Teams. So if you are wanting your volunteers to learn from another volunteer that has been effective in presenting on Microsoft Teams, just share that information with them and encourage them to register for that. And then our next session is going to be, it's not July 20th, it's actually August 20th. Sorry for that quick typo, but it is on volunteer utilization. I know you do have it, most of you, on your calendar. We do digital badges, so I will share that reflection link in the chat, so you can go ahead and do that to earn your digital badge. Does anybody have any additional questions? I know I see some stuff in the chat. Retype that. All right. And then Allison, you say our youth need to keep track of their volunteering also. Yes, and so I've actually reached out to Karen about the impact log, and there's just a couple quick changes she wanted, but it is available. And the great thing about Give Pulse is they understand safety and FERPA and whatnot. So it's a system that we could upgrade and allow our youth to also start logging their service, because we want to get that information from them as well. One of the things that was recommended was kind of on the onboarding piece, where we could find more information about the roles that those youth have within their parish. And so that's one thing that they had recommended, that I kind of upgrade those selections. So thank you, Allison. And if you want to, work with me on testing that out with your youth, absolutely reach out to me. I'd be happy to help. So thanks so much.